The sun hung low over the Dragoon Mountains, painting the Arizona sky in shades of burnt orange and deep purple. Clay McAllister wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, squinting against the harsh light as he counted his cattle for the third time that day. 27. There should have been 32. He'd been running this small ranch alone for near on 5 years now, ever since the consumption took his father. The land wasn't much, just 40 acres of scrub grass and mesquite, barely enough to keep a small herd alive through the dry months. But it was his, bought with his father's blood and sweat, and maintained with his own. Clay was a tall man, lean from years of hard work and harder living. His hands were rough as rawhide, his face weathered beyond his 28 years. The only soft thing about him was the way his gray eyes would sometimes drift to the small wooden cross on the hill behind the ranch house, where his mother lay buried these past 12 years. He'd been 16 when the Apache came that night. His father had been away, driving cattle to Tucson. Clay had hidden in the root cellar like his mother told him, pressing his hands over his ears to block out the sounds above. When morning came and the smoke cleared, he'd found her body near the well, her treasured silver necklace gone along with her life. The necklace his father had given her on their wedding day, a delicate chain with a distinctive Thunderbird design that his father had commissioned from a Mexican silversmith in Tombstone. Clay shook off the memory and focused on the present problem. 5 head missing. The tracks led southeast, toward the mountains. Could be rustlers, though most cattle thieves preferred easier targets than a poor man's herd. Could be the cattle had simply wandered off seeking water, but the tracks looked wrong somehow. Too organized, too deliberate. He saddled his mare, a sturdy paint horse named Dolly, and packed his rifle, canteen, and enough hardtack and jerky for 2 days. The trail was clear enough in the sandy soil, the hoof prints of his cattle mixed with the unshod tracks of Indian ponies. His jaw tightened. Apache, most likely. There were still bands of them living in the mountains, refugees who'd refused to go to the reservation at San Carlos. Clay followed the trail through the afternoon heat, up into the foothills where the saguaro cactus gave way to juniper and scrub oak. The tracks led through a narrow canyon, the walls rising steep on either side. It was the kind of place his father had warned him about. Too easy to get trapped, too hard to escape if things went wrong. But those were his cattle, and he couldn't afford to lose even 5 head. Not with the mortgage payment coming due and beef prices what they were. As the sun began to sink behind the mountains, Clay smelled smoke, cook fire smoke, mixed with the scent of roasting meat, his meat, most likely. He dismounted and tied Dolly to a mesquite bush, then crept forward on foot, rifle in hand. The Apache camp was smaller than he'd expected, maybe a dozen wickiups scattered around a central fire. He counted perhaps 30 people, mostly women and children. The men would be out hunting or standing guard. His cattle were penned in a natural corral formed by fallen rocks, very much alive and looking none the worse for their journey. Clay settled behind a boulder to wait and watch. He wasn't fool enough to take on an entire band alone, but maybe when things quieted down, he could slip in and drive his cattle out. It wasn't the Apache way to post many guards. They relied more on the remoteness of their camps for protection. As he watched, a woman emerged from one of the wickiups. She was younger than most of the others, maybe 25, with the proud bearing of someone used to being obeyed. Her long black hair was tied back with a leather cord, and she wore a traditional camp dress decorated with beadwork. But it was what hung around her neck that made Clay's blood run cold. His mother's necklace. The silver Thunderbird caught the firelight, seeming to mock him across the years in the distance. The same delicate chain, the same distinctive design with the bird's wings spread wide and tiny turquoise stones for eyes. For a moment, Clay couldn't breathe. The world narrowed to that glint of silver, and he was 16 again, kneeling beside his mother's body, searching frantically for the necklace that had always hung around her neck. The Apache had taken everything of value that night, his mother's few pieces of jewelry, his father's spare rifle, even the silver dollars from the coffee tin. But it was the necklace Clay had mourned most, because his mother had loved it so. And now here it was, worn casual as you please by an Apache woman who probably didn't even know or care where it had come from. Rage flooded through him, hot and blinding. Without thinking, Clay stood up from behind his boulder and started down the slope toward the camp. His rifle was in his hands, but he didn't remember raising it. All he could see was that necklace. All he could think was that he was going to take it back. He was halfway to the camp before the first shout went up. An old woman spotted him and cried out a warning. The camp exploded into action, women grabbing children, men appearing from nowhere with weapons in hand. Clay kept walking, his eyes fixed on the woman with the necklace. She didn't run like the others. Instead, she stood her ground near the central fire, watching him come with an expression of curiosity mixed with contempt. Up close, he could see she was beautiful in the way a hawk is beautiful, fierce and wild and dangerous. "That necklace," Clay said, his voice rough with emotion. "That was my mother's." The woman's eyes narrowed. She said something in Apache to the men who had surrounded Clay, their rifles pointed at his chest. Then, in accented but clear English, she said, "You are either very brave or very stupid. White man, which is it?" "The necklace," Clay repeated. "She was wearing it when your people killed her 12 years ago. I want it back." The woman laughed, but there was no humor in it. 12 years? You come here with a gun, threatening my people, over something that happened when I was a child? You whites, always living in yesterday instead of today. I don't care about yesterday or today. I care about that necklace. It belonged to my mother, and now it belongs to me. She fingered the Thunderbird pendant almost mockingly. It was given to me by my uncle when he died. He took it in a raid. Yes, from some white woman who was where she shouldn't have been, on land that was not hers. The casual dismissal of his mother's death made Clay's vision go red at the edges. He took another step forward, and immediately felt the barrel of a rifle press against his spine. "I'll trade you for it," he said desperately. "My horse, my saddle. I have $20 in gold hidden at my ranch. It's yours. All of it, for that necklace." The woman, she had to be their leader. Clay realized, from the way the others deferred to her, studied him with dark, intelligent eyes. "And if I say no, what then? White man, you'll shoot us all? 1 man against 30? Clay knew he was trapped. The smart thing would be to back away, to leave and come back with help. But he couldn't make himself move. That necklace had haunted his dreams for 12 years. It was the last piece of his mother he might ever have. "Please," he said, hating how the words sounded. "It's all I have left of her." Something flickered in the woman's eyes. Surprise. Perhaps that a white man would beg an Apache for anything. She was about to speak when one of the men, a scarred warrior with gray threading his hair, struck Clay from behind with the butt of his rifle. Clay went down hard, his own weapon spinning away into the darkness. He tried to get up, but boots and rifle butts rained down on him from all sides. His last coherent thought before the darkness took him was that he'd been a fool to come here alone. His mother wouldn't have wanted him to die for a piece of silver, no matter how precious. When Clay woke, his head felt like someone had used it for an anvil. He was in one of the wiki-ups, his hands tied behind his back with rawhide strips. The woman with his mother's necklace sat across from him, studying him by the light of a small fire. "You're awake," she observed. "Good. I was beginning to think my warriors had hit you too hard." Clay tested his bonds. They were expertly tied. "No give at all." "What are you going to do with me?" "That depends on you." She leaned forward, and the firelight caught the necklace again, sending little sparks of silver dancing across the wiki-up's hide walls. "I am Ayoka, daughter of Chief Naichi, who is dead. These are my people now. What's left of them. And you, white man, are a problem." "My name is Clay McAllister, and I'm only a problem because you stole my cattle. We took what we needed to feed our children. Your people have taken our whole world. I think the trade is unequal. Don't you?" Clay couldn't argue with that, though he wanted to. "What happens now?" Ayoka was quiet for a long moment. "My warriors want to kill you. They say you're a scout for the soldiers, that more will come if we let you go. I'm no scout, just a rancher who wants his property back." He met her eyes steadily. "Both my cattle and my mother's necklace. You speak of property." Her voice was soft but edged with steel. "This land, all of it, from here to where the sun sets. This was Apache land before your people came. Every spring, every canyon, every deer trail. We knew them all. And now we hide in the margins like coyotes, taking your scraps to survive. So do not speak to me of property." Clay McAllister. Despite everything, Clay found himself really looking at her for the first time. She couldn't be much younger than him, but she carried herself like someone much older. There was a weariness in her eyes that spoke of too many losses, too many retreats into the ever-shrinking wilderness. "I'm sorry about your land," he said finally. "But I didn't take it. I was born here, same as you. And that necklace, whoever killed my mother is probably dead now too, but that doesn't change the fact that seeing you wear it is like a knife in my gut." Ayoka fingered the necklace thoughtfully. Outside, Clay could hear the camp settling for the night, children being hushed, dogs barking, the low murmur of conversation, normal sounds of life that seemed strange in his current circumstances. "Tell me about this night," Ayoka said suddenly. "When your mother died." Clay didn't want to, but something in her voice compelled him. So he told her about the August night when the raiders came, about hiding in the cellar while his world burned above him, about finding his mother's body and his father's tears when he returned to find his family destroyed, about how the necklace had become a symbol of everything lost that night. When he finished, Ayoka was quiet for a long time. Then she stood and walked to the entrance of the wickiup. "A storm is coming," she said, though Clay couldn't hear any wind. "We'll wait until it passes. Then we'll see." She left him there, tied and helpless, with only the dying fire for company. Outside, he could hear her giving orders in Apache. The camp grew quiet, battening down for whatever weather was approaching. Clay tested his bonds again, but whoever had tied them knew their business. He was well and truly caught. All he could do was wait and wonder if he'd ever see another sunrise, or if his bones would join the countless others scattered across this hard land, white and Apache alike, all equal in death. The storm Ayoka had predicted arrived just after midnight, a violent desert tempest that turned the world into a chaos of sand and wind. The wickiup shook and strained against its moorings, and Clay could hear the panicked whinnying of horses and cattle outside. Lightning split the sky in jagged white forks, illuminating the camp in brief, stark snapshots. Clay dozed fitfully through the night, his shoulders aching from the awkward position of his bound arms. When dawn finally came, pale and dust-filtered, Ayoka returned. She carried a water gourd and a piece of flatbread, eyeing him with what might have been curiosity. "The storm has trapped us here for at least another day," she said, kneeling to hold the water to his lips. "The canyon floods when the rains come like this. Even we cannot leave until the water goes down." Clay drank gratefully, though it galled him to be dependent on her kindness. "My ranch," he said when he'd finished. "No one knows I'm here. If I don't return, you have no wife, no family?" "No one." The admission hung between them, stark as the lightning had been. "Just me and the cattle." Ayoka studied him, in the pale morning light filtering through the wickiup smoke hole. He could see her more clearly. There were lines around her eyes that spoke of squinting into too many suns, and a small scar on her chin, white against her copper skin. "Why do you live alone?" she asked, settling cross-legged near the fire. "White men usually take wives, have many children to work their stolen land. My father died 5 years back. Never found a woman who'd have me after that." Clay shifted, trying to ease the burning in his shoulders. "Been too busy trying to keep the ranch going to think much about it. What about you? No husband?" Her face darkened. "He died at San Carlos. The reservation, disease took him, along with many others. The agents said we would be safe there, protected. Instead, we died faster than we ever did fighting." She touched the necklace absently. That's why we left. Better to die free than waste away behind their fences. Clay wanted to hate her, but found he couldn't. There was too much pain in her voice, too much loss that echoed his own. The necklace, he said quietly. You said your uncle gave it to you. Yes, Uncle Kuruk. He was kind to me after my husband died, gave me what little he had. She fingered the Thunderbird pendant. He said it was powerful medicine, taken from a strong woman. He said it would make me strong too. She was strong. Clay agreed, his throat tight. Came out here from Missouri when she was just 18. Learned to shoot, to ride, to doctor wounds and deliver calves. She could make a feast from nothing but beans and wild game. He closed his eyes, remembering. She used to sing while she worked, hymns, mostly, but sometimes other songs. She had a voice like a meadowlark. When he opened his eyes, Ayoka was watching him intently. You loved her very much. She was everything. The simple truth of it made his chest ache. After she died, my father, he tried, but something in him broke that night. He lasted another few years, but it was like watching a candle burn down to nothing. Ayoka stood abruptly and cut his bonds with a knife from her belt. Clay gasped as blood flowed back into his hands, pins and needles of pain shooting up his arms. Why? He asked, rubbing his wrists. You're no threat to us. She moved to the entrance of the wickiup. And I don't keep men tied up like dogs. You can move freely in the camp, but if you try to leave or cause trouble, my warriors will kill you. Understood? Clay nodded. He had no intention of causing trouble, not outnumbered 30-1, but he wasn't giving up on the necklace either. Somehow, he had to make her understand what it meant to him. The camp in daylight was even smaller than it had seemed the night before. The wickiups were patched and weather-worn, the people thin and watchful. Children peered at him from behind their mothers' skirts, fascinated and fearful in equal measure. The warriors watched him with open hostility, hands never far from their weapons. Clay found his cattle in their makeshift pen, counted them to make sure all 5 were there, then wandered to where he could see the canyon entrance. Ayoka had been right. Brown water rushed through it, carrying branches and debris from higher up the mountain. No one would be leaving until it subsided. White man. The voice came from behind him. Clay turned to find the scarred warrior who'd knocked him unconscious. The man's English was heavily accented but clear. You look for ways to run? Just looking, Clay said carefully. Your leader said I could move around the camp. Ayoka is too trusting, too soft. The warrior spat in the dust. Her father would have killed you last night. Her husband too, but women. He shook his head in disgust. Seems to me she's kept you all alive this long. Clay observed, can't be too soft for that. The warrior's eyes narrowed dangerously. You know nothing, white man, nothing of what we've lost, what we've suffered. That trinket you cry for, it is nothing compared to what your people have taken from us. He stalked away before Clay could respond. But the encounter left Clay thoughtful. If there was dissension in the band about Ayoka's leadership, maybe he could use that somehow. Then he caught himself, ashamed. These people were starving, desperate. Was he really planning to exploit their divisions for a piece of silver? As the day wore on, Clay found himself drawn into the rhythms of the camp despite himself. He helped an old woman gather firewood when he saw her struggling with a heavy load. He showed 2 young boys how to improve their rabbit snares, using tricks his father had taught him. When one of the horses developed a stone bruise, he helped treat it, earning a grudging nod of approval from the horse's owner. Ayoka watched it all from a distance, her expression unreadable. As evening approached, she beckoned him to join her by the central fire. My people say you have good hands with horses, she said. Where did you learn? My father. He was a horse doctor in the army before he came west. Clay accepted a bowl of thin stew from a woman tending the fire. It was mostly water and wild onions, with precious little meat. Taught me everything he knew. Useful skills. Ayoka ate her own portion slowly, savoring each bite. Tell me, Clay McAllister, what do you see when you look at my people? Clay considered the question. I see folks trying to survive, just like me. Yet you would take back your cattle, leave us to starve. Those cattle are all I have. Without them, I lose my ranch. Then I'm no better off than— He stopped, realizing what he'd been about to say. Than us? Ayoka's smile was bitter. Yes, you would be like us then. No home, no place to belong. Always moving, always hungry, always afraid. This is the life your people have given us. They ate in silence after that. As darkness fell, Clay noticed the camp settling into defensive positions. Guards took up posts on the surrounding ridges, and the women and children gathered in the center of the camp. You're expecting trouble? Clay asked. We always expect trouble. Ayoka's hand went to the necklace again, a gesture Clay was beginning to recognize as her tell when she was worried. There are soldiers at Fort Huachuca, settlers in Tombstone, Mexicans to the south. All want us dead or on the reservation. So yes, we expect trouble. That night, Clay slept under the stars near the horse pen. No one offered him shelter, and he didn't ask. He wrapped himself in his coat and tried not to think about how his absence would be noticed back home. Old Sam at the neighboring ranch might check on him in a few days, but by then it could be too late. He woke to the sound of a child crying. The moon was high, casting silver light across the camp. Near one of the wickiups, a woman was trying to quiet a small boy who clutched his arm to his chest. Without thinking, Clay got up and approached. The woman shrank back, but the child's whimpers drew him on. He's hurt, Clay asked softly. The woman said something in Apache, shaking her head, but Clay could see the problem. The boy's arm was bent at an unnatural angle. Dislocated shoulder, most likely. I can help, Clay said, gesturing to the arm. I've set these before, on calves, mostly, but the principle's the same. The woman looked terrified, but the boy's continued crying must have decided her. She nodded reluctantly. Clay knelt beside the child, who couldn't have been more than 6. This is going to hurt for just a second, he said, knowing the boy probably didn't understand English, but hoping his tone would convey reassurance. Then it'll feel much better. Can you be brave? The boy stared at him with huge dark eyes. Clay gently took the small arm, felt for the displaced joint, then with one quick, practiced movement, popped it back into place. The child shrieked once, then blinked in surprise as the pain receded. There we go, Clay said, fashioning a simple sling from his bandana. Keep it still for a few days and it'll be good as new. The mother clutched the boy to her, tears streaming down her face. She said something in Apache that sounded like a blessing or a thank you. Maybe both. What are you doing? Clay turned to find Ayoka standing behind him, her face unreadable in the moonlight. Kid had a dislocated shoulder. I fixed it. She knelt beside the mother and child, speaking rapidly in Apache. The woman responded, gesturing at Clay and obviously telling the story. Ayoka's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Come, she said to Clay. Walk with me. They moved to the edge of the camp, where they could see the stars spreading like spilled silver across the desert sky. The storm had washed the air clean, and everything smelled of sage and wet earth. That boy is my cousin's son, Ayoka said finally. His father is dead. His mother has no one else. Every child deserves a father, Clay said, or at least someone to look after them. Is that why you helped? To gain favor with me? Clay thought about it. No, I helped because he was hurt and I could fix it. Sometimes it's that simple. Ayoka turned to face him fully. In the starlight, the necklace gleamed at her throat. You puzzle me. Clay McAllister, you come here with violence in your heart, ready to kill for a piece of metal, but then you doctor our horses and heal our children. Which man are you? Maybe both, Clay admitted. Maybe neither. I've carried this anger for so long, I don't know how to put it down. Every time I see that necklace, I see her lying in the dust. I hear the silence where her singing should be. And you think having the necklace back will bring her song again? The question hit him like a physical blow. No, Nothing will bring that back, but it's all I have left of her. Can't you understand that? Ayoka was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached up and unclasped the necklace, holding it out to him. Take it. Clay stared at her, stunned. Just like that? It's just a piece of metal. As you said, if it brings you peace, take it. Clay reached for the necklace, then hesitated. In the starlight, he could see the weariness in her face, the weight she carried trying to keep her people alive. The necklace had been a gift from her uncle, one of the few kindnesses in a life full of loss. Who was he to take that from her? Tell me about your uncle, he said instead. The one who gave this to you. Surprise flickered across Ayoka's face. Then she lowered her hand, still holding the necklace. Why? Because maybe if I understand, maybe it'll help somehow. So she told him about Kuruk, who had been her father's brother and her protector after her parents died. How he'd taught her to track and hunt, to read the weather and the seasons. How he'd fought the soldiers until the very end. Then walked into San Carlos with his head high. How the reservation had killed him slowly, stripping away his pride and purpose until only the shell remained. The day before he died, he gave me this. She touched the necklace, said it would keep me strong when the world tried to break me. And it has, every time I want to give up, to surrender to despair. I touch it and remember his words. Clay felt something shift inside his chest, a loosening of the tight knot of anger he'd carried for so long. My mother would have liked that, he said quietly. She always said jewelry should carry stories, not just shine pretty. They stood in silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and its pack answered. The sound was lonely and wild, and perfect for this moment balanced between grief and understanding. The water will be down by tomorrow, Ayoka said finally. You can take your cattle and go. And the necklace. She looked at him for a long moment, then fastened it back around her neck. I think it should stay where it's needed most. Your mother's song lives in your memory, not in this silver, but my uncle's strength. I still need that. Does that make sense? It did, though Clay couldn't have explained why. Maybe it was the child's arm he'd fixed, or the thin stew that was all these people had to eat. Maybe it was the way Ayoka carried herself, proud despite everything her people had lost. Or maybe he was just tired of being angry. Keep it, he said. Both our ghosts can share it. Something passed between them then, understanding deeper than words. They were enemies by birth and circumstance, but in that moment, under the vast Arizona sky, they were just two people who had lost too much and were trying to find a way forward. Come, Ayoka said. It's late, and tomorrow will be difficult enough. She led him back to the camp, to a small wickiup set apart from the others. You can sleep here tonight. It was my husband's. No one uses it now. Clay ducked inside, finding blankets and a buffalo robe laid out neat and clean. It smelled of smoke and herbs and something indefinably sad. When he turned to thank her, Ayoka was already gone, walking back through the sleeping camp like a ghost herself. He lay down on the unfamiliar bedding and stared up through the smoke hole at the stars. Somewhere out there, his ranch waited empty. His cattle would go home tomorrow, and so would he. But something had changed tonight, something he couldn't quite name. The anger that had driven him here was still present, but muted somehow, transformed into something more complex. As sleep finally took him, Clay's last thought was of his mother's voice, singing one of her favorite hymns. And for the first time in 12 years, the memory brought more comfort than pain. The morning came too soon, bringing with it the reality of departure. Clay woke to find the camp already stirring, women tending fires and men checking the canyon entrance. The floodwaters had receded, leaving only damp sand and scattered debris to mark their passage. Clay found his cattle already separated from the Apache herd, his paint mare dolly saddled and waiting nearby. Someone he suspected Ayoka had seen to the preparations while he slept. His rifle leaned against a rock, cleaned and loaded. The scarred warrior from yesterday stood guard over his belongings, still radiating hostility. "You go now," he said curtly. "Take your beasts and don't come back." Clay nodded, checking his gear. Everything was there, even the $20 in gold he'd hidden in his saddlebags. These people could have taken it all, but they hadn't. He looked around for Ayoka, but didn't see her among the busy figures. "Where is your leader?" he asked the warrior. "Gone, scouting the trail ahead." The man's expression suggested this was a lie, but Clay didn't push it. Maybe it was better this way, leaving without goodbyes or complications. He mounted Dolly and started working his cattle toward the canyon entrance. The animals were skittish after their adventure, but responded to his familiar voice and movements. As they picked their way down the rocky trail, Clay found himself looking back repeatedly at the camp growing smaller behind him. At the canyon mouth, he pulled up short. Ayoka sat her pony in the shadows of the rocks, watching the desert stretch out before them. She'd changed from her camp dress into riding clothes, leather leggings and a man's shirt that had seen better days. The necklace still gleamed at her throat. "I thought you'd gone ahead," Clay said. "I did. The way is clear to the flatlands." She studied him with those dark, unreadable eyes. "After that, you know the way." "I know it." They sat their horses in silence for a moment. The morning sun was climbing, already promising another scorching day. Clay's cattle lowed impatiently, eager to move toward water and familiar grazing. "That warrior, the one with the scars, he doesn't trust me," Clay observed. "Nasha doesn't trust anyone. He lost his whole family to soldiers 3 winters ago." Ayoka shifted in her saddle, leather creaking. "He thinks I'm weak for letting you go. Are you?" "Perhaps, but I think there's been enough killing between our peoples. It has to stop somewhere." Clay wanted to say something profound, something that would capture the strange understanding they'd reached, but words failed him. Instead, he touched the brim of his hat in farewell and started to move his cattle forward. "Wait!" Ayoka's voice stopped him. She rode closer, close enough that he could see the fine lines of worry around her eyes. "There's something I didn't tell you last night, about your mother's necklace." Clay's hands tightened on the reins. "What about it?" "My uncle, before he died, he told me more about that night, the raid where he took it." She paused, seeming to gather herself. "He said the woman fought hard, harder than most. She wounded 2 warriors before the end. He said she died with courage, protecting something in the root cellar." Clay's throat closed up. "That was me. She was protecting me. I thought so." Ayoka reached out as if to touch his arm, then pulled back. He said she could have run. The house was burning. There was smoke and confusion. She could have escaped into the darkness, but she stayed by that cellar door until her last breath. Tears burned Clay's eyes, surprising him. He hadn't cried for his mother in years, thought he'd used up all those tears. But hearing this, knowing she'd had a choice and chosen him. "Thank you," he managed, "for telling me. There's more." Ayoka seemed to steel herself. "The warriors who killed her, they're dead now. Nasha killed one of them himself in a fight over spoils. The other died of fever the following winter. My uncle was the last, and he's gone too. I tell you this so you know, justice, such as it is, has been done. The wheel has turned full circle." Clay didn't know what to say to that. Did it change anything, knowing her killers were dead? Did it ease the ache that had lived in his chest for 12 years? He wasn't sure, but somehow, it seemed to matter that Ayoka had wanted him to know. "Your cattle," she said, changing the subject. "Will their loss hurt you badly?" "Some, but I'll manage. Always have. We only took what we needed. 5 had to feed 30 people for perhaps 2 weeks. Then we'll have to hunt again, or raid again, or go hungry again." Her voice was matter-of-fact, but Clay heard the weariness underneath. "This is our life now." "Where will you go?" "South, maybe into Mexico, or further up into the mountains, wherever the soldiers aren't." She smiled without humor. "We're getting very good at being nowhere." They'd reached a fork in the trail. Clay's path led west, back to his ranch. Ayoka's led south, deeper into the wild country. It was time to part ways, yet neither moved. "That boy," Clay said suddenly. "The one with the hurt arm. What's his name?" "Beatsi. It means he is strong, in our language." Ayoka's face softened slightly, though he's small for his age. "Why?" "Just wanted to know." Clay reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small leather pouch. "Here, for him and the others." Ayoka caught the pouch, frowning as she felt its weight. "Your gold? No, we didn't take your cattle for payment." "It's not payment, it's—" Clay searched for words. "It's for the children. Maybe it'll buy food in some Mexican town. Or blankets for winter. I don't know. I can't ride away knowing those kids are hungry." "Your ranch. You said you needed—" "I'll find another way. Always have." He managed a wry smile. "Maybe I'll even take up horse doctoring like my father. Plenty of horses in Tombstone need tending." Ayoka weighed the pouch in her hand, then tucked it into her belt. "I won't forget this kindness." "It's not kindness, it's just—" "Right." They looked at each other across the cultural chasm that separated them. White rancher and Apache leader. Man and woman. Enemies who'd found something unexpected in each other. Clay felt an almost physical pull toward her, a desire to follow her into the wild places and leave his old life behind. It was madness, he knew, but for a moment the urge was overwhelming. "In another life," Ayoka said softly, as if reading his thoughts. "In another world, perhaps we could have been friends. In another world." Clay agreed. She wheeled her pony around and kicked it into a lope, heading south without looking back. Clay watched until she disappeared around a bend in the trail, then turned his attention to his cattle. They needed water and rest, and he had a ranch to save somehow. The journey home was uneventful but felt longer than the trip out. Clay's mind kept returning to the Apache camp, the thin children, the weary women, the men trying to maintain their dignity in defeat, and Ayoka, always Ayoka, wearing his mother's necklace like armor against the world. By late afternoon, his ranch came into view. Everything looked the same as he'd left it. The small adobe house, the wooden barn, the corrals standing empty in the heat. But Clay felt like a different man than the one who'd ridden out in anger just 2 days before. He penned his recovered cattle and saw to Dolly, then walked to the hill behind the house. His mother's grave was marked with a simple wooden cross and a cairn of stones. Clay knelt beside it, hat in hand. "I found your necklace, Ma," he said quietly. "It's with someone who needs it now. Someone strong, like you were. I think you'd approve." The wind whispered through the mesquite, and for a moment Clay could almost hear her voice in it, singing one of her hymns. He stayed there until the sun began to sink, making peace with the decision he'd made. That night, unable to sleep, Clay sat on his porch and thought about paths not taken, somewhere to the south. Ayoka and her people were making camp, posting guards, sharing what little they had. The $20 might buy them food for a few weeks. But what then? How long could they keep running before the world closed in entirely? He thought about the boy, Beatsi, with his dislocated shoulder and brave eyes. Thought about the mothers trying to keep their children fed on pride and wild onions. Thought about Ayoka's uncle, dying on the reservation with only a stolen necklace to pass on to his niece. The next morning, Clay rose with a purpose he hadn't felt in years. He couldn't change the past or solve the enormous injustices between the races, but maybe he could do something small, something real. He rode to Tombstone and sold his father's spare saddle and his grandfather's watch. Combined with his savings, it gave him enough to buy supplies: flour, beans, salt pork, blankets, simple medicines. He loaded everything onto a pack mule and set out again for the mountains. It took him most of the day to find their trail. Ayoka's people knew how to move without leaving much sign, but Clay had learned a thing or two about tracking over the years. He followed scattered hoof prints and the occasional broken branch, always heading south. He found them at sunset, camped by a spring in a hidden valley. The guards saw him coming. Of course, they wouldn't have survived this long otherwise. By the time Clay reached the camp, warriors had formed a defensive line, weapons ready. Ayoka pushed through them, her face a mixture of surprise and something else. Concern, fear. "What are you doing here? I told you not to follow." "Not following, just delivering supplies." Clay gestured to the laden mule. "Figured you could use them more than the merchants in Tombstone." "This is dangerous. If anyone saw you, if they tracked you here—" "No one saw. I was careful." He dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. "I'm not staying. Just wanted to drop these off." Nasha snarled something in Apache, clearly unhappy with this development, but Ayoka raised a hand, silencing him. She walked to the pack mule, examining the supplies with growing wonder. "Medicine," she breathed, holding up a bottle of laudanum. "Real medicine. And so much food." "It's not charity," Clay said quickly, knowing how pride could sting. Call it payment for information. For telling me about my mother's last moments. That was worth more than gold to me." Ayoka looked at him for a long moment, and he saw she understood the fiction for what it was, a way for both of them to save face. "Then we accept your payment with gratitude." The women and children gathered around as the supplies were unloaded, chattering excitedly. Clay saw the boy, Bidsy, still wearing his sling, and knelt to check the arm. It was healing well, the joint stable. "You'll be wrestling bears in no time," Clay told him, demonstrating a few gentle exercises to help restore strength. The boy grinned, not understanding the words but responding to the tone. As Clay prepared to leave, Ayoka walked him to where he'd left Dolly. The sunset painted the mountains in shades of copper and gold, and the desert air smelled of creosote and sage. "Why?" she asked simply. "Why risk this for us?" Clay considered his answer. "Because someone should have done it for my mother. Because those kids deserve full bellies. Because—" He paused, then spoke the truth. "Because I can't stop thinking about you." The admission hung between them like a living thing. Ayoka's breath caught, and for a moment her careful mask slipped, revealing the woman underneath. Vulnerable, lonely, drawn to him despite every reason not to be. "You must not think such things," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Your people and mine, I know." Clay swung up into his saddle, needing distance before he did something foolish. "I know all the reasons why it's impossible. Doesn't change the fact that it's true." "Clay." She said his name like a prayer or a curse. He couldn't tell which. "Don't come back here. Please. It's not safe for any of us." "I won't," he lied, already knowing he would. "Take care of yourself. Ayoka, take care of them all." He rode away without looking back, but he felt her eyes on him until the gathering darkness swallowed the trail. Back at his ranch, he lay in his narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, wondering what madness had taken hold of him. A white rancher and an Apache leader. It was like something out of a dime novel. Except dime novels usually ended with somebody dead. But when he closed his eyes, he saw her face in the firelight, proud and beautiful and utterly out of reach. He saw the way she'd looked at him when he'd helped the boy, the softening around her eyes when he'd brought the supplies. Most of all, he remembered the catch in her voice when she'd said his name. Clay McAllister, practical rancher and grieving son, had gone looking for justice and found something else entirely. Something that would either save him or destroy him. He touched the empty place where his anger used to live and found it filled with a different ache entirely. His mother's necklace was gone, but in its place was a connection he couldn't explain and couldn't deny. The wheel had turned full circle, as Ayoka had said, but it seemed it wasn't done turning yet. Outside, a coyote howled at the rising moon, and Clay wondered if Ayoka heard it too, wherever she was. Wondered if she lay awake thinking of impossible things, just as he did. The night stretched on, full of questions that had no good answers, and dawn was still a long way off. Clay tried to stay away. For 2 weeks, he threw himself into ranch work with a fervor that surprised even him. He mended every fence, cleaned every water trough, and worked his horses until both he and they were exhausted. But at night, when the coyotes sang to the stars, his thoughts invariably turned south to a hidden valley and a woman who wore his mother's necklace. The breaking point came when he rode to Tombstone for supplies and heard talk in the general store. Soldiers from Fort Huachuca were planning a sweep through the dragoons, determined to flush out the renegade Apaches once and for all. "About time," the store clerk said, measuring out Clay's flour. "Those savages have been stealing cattle all along the border. Folks are scared to let their children play outside." Clay kept his expression neutral, paid for his goods, and left without comment. But his heart was racing. The Army's sweeps were brutal affairs. Shoot first, sort out the innocent from the guilty later. If they found Ayoka's band... He was saddling Dolly before he'd made a conscious decision to go. This time, he took his rifle and extra ammunition, plus his father's old Army Colt. He wasn't planning to fight the United States Army, but he wouldn't stand by and watch a massacre either. The sun was setting by the time he reached the hidden valley. It was empty. Only cold fire pits and scattered debris showing where the camp had been. Clay dismounted and studied the signs. They'd left in a hurry, maybe 2 days ago. The trail led deeper into the mountains, toward the Mexican border. He followed through the night, grateful for a nearly full moon to light the way. The trail was fresher now. He was gaining on them. Just before dawn, he smelled smoke and slowed Dolly to a walk. The new camp was smaller, tucked into a box canyon with only one way in or out. A terrible defensive position. Clay thought, they must have been exhausted to stop here. He left Dolly tied to a juniper and crept forward on foot. "You make much noise for a white man trying to be quiet." Clay spun to find Ayoka standing behind him, a rifle pointed at his chest. She looked tired, her face drawn with strain, but her hands were steady. "The Army," Clay said urgently. "They're coming, a big sweep through all these mountains. You have to move." She lowered the rifle slightly. "We know. Our scouts saw them yesterday. That's why we're here, resting before we cross into Mexico. This canyon's a death trap. If they find you here, they won't." But her voice lacked conviction. "We'll be gone by sunrise. Your people are exhausted. The children can barely walk. You need—" Clay stopped, struck by a sudden thought. "Come to my ranch." Ayoka stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. "What?" "It's the last place they'd look. You could rest, get supplies, then cross the border safely after the soldiers pass." The idea was insane, but Clay pressed on. "I have a root cellar, like the one where my mother hid me. It's big enough for the women and children. The men could hide in the barn loft." "You would hide Apache in your home? The same Apache who killed your mother?" "Not the same." Clay said firmly. "Those men are dead. You're just people trying to survive." Ayoka turned away, conflict clear in every line of her body. "My people would never agree, nor would yours. If they found out, then we make sure they don't find out." Clay stepped closer, close enough to see the pulse beating in her throat above the silver necklace. "Ayoka, please, I couldn't save my mother, but maybe I can save. Don't," her voice was sharp. "Don't make this about your guilt or your feelings. My people's lives aren't— We're not your redemption." The rebuke stung because it was partly true, but only partly. "You're right. This isn't about me. It's about those kids not dying because they were born Apache. It's about you living to see another sunrise. That's all." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'll speak to the others. Wait here." She disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness. Clay waited, listening to the night sounds and trying not to think about what he was risking. Harboring hostile Indians was a hanging offense. He'd lose his ranch, maybe his life, but the image of soldiers finding this canyon, of Bidsi and the other children caught in crossfire. Ayoka returned with Nasha and 2 other warriors. The scarred man's face was thunderous. He spat a stream of Apache at Clay, clearly opposed to the idea. "He says you're trying to trap us." Ayoka translated unnecessarily. The tone made the meaning clear. "That you'll lead the soldiers right to us." If I wanted you dead, why would I ride all night to warn you? Clay met Nasha's glare steadily. I gain nothing from this but risk. More argument in Apache, voices rising. Other members of the band were waking, peering out from their shelters. Clay saw the women clutching their children, fear stark on their faces. Finally, Ayoka held up her hand for silence. We'll vote. All who can speak have a voice in this. The debate that followed was in Apache, but Clay could follow the emotional currents. Fear, anger, desperate hope, resignation. When the vote came, it was close, but the majority chose to accept his offer. You understand what you risk? Ayoka asked him quietly while the others prepared to move. If we're discovered, I understand. Clay helped an elderly woman onto one of their few horses. We'll need to move fast. Dawn's coming. The journey to his ranch was a nightmare of tension. 30 people, trying to move quickly and quietly through terrain that offered little cover. Every bird call made Clay's heart jump. Every distant sound could be soldiers. They reached the ranch just as the eastern sky was turning pink. Clay sent the women and children to the root cellar immediately, then helped the men conceal the horses in a wash behind the barn. The warriors took positions in the loft, weapons ready. If soldiers come, I'll try to get rid of them. Clay told Ayoka, if shooting starts, get your people out the back and run for the border. She nodded, then surprised him by touching his arm. Why, Clay? The truth this time. He looked at her, tired, proud, beautiful in the morning light. Because it's right, and because... He stopped, then forged ahead. Because somewhere between hating you and helping you, I started loving you. God help me, but it's true. She pulled back as if burned. You don't even know me. I know enough. Clay heard horses approaching on the road. Get inside. Hide. The riders were neighbors, not soldiers. Tom Bradley and his son Jake, from the Double B Ranch to the north. Clay met them in the yard, trying to look casual despite his pounding heart. Morning, Clay. Tom called. You heard about the army sweep? Heard something in town. They find anything? Not yet, but they're working this way. Colonel says they got reports of a band near here. We're checking all the ranches, making sure folks are all right. Clay forced himself to remain calm. Appreciate the concern. Haven't seen anything out here but the usual. Jake Bradley was eyeing Clay's horses in the corral. Dolly looks rode hard. You been somewhere? Checking the south pasture. Thought I might have lost some cattle. Clay shrugged. False alarm. They were just down by the creek. Tom nodded, but Jake kept staring at the horses. The younger man had never liked Clay much. Jealous perhaps of Clay's reputation as a horseman. Now his suspicion was almost palpable. We'll let you get to your breakfast, Tom said, turning his horse. You see anything unusual? You ride for help. Here? Will do. Thanks, Tom. They rode off, but Clay saw Jake looking back several times. Trouble there, maybe. He waited until they were out of sight, then quickly moved the Apache horses to better concealment. The wash would hide them from casual view, but not from a real search. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Clay went about his normal chores, acutely aware of the hidden people depending on him. Twice he saw dust clouds in the distance that might have been army patrols. Each time, his hand went to his rifle. As evening approached, Ayoka emerged from the house. She'd been coordinating with her people, making sure everyone stayed quiet and hidden. Now she joined Clay by the corral, where he was pretending to mend tack. The children are frightened, she said. Being underground, it reminds them of the reservation cellars where the sick were kept. I'm sorry. It was the safest place I could think of. You did well. She watched him work, her presence both comforting and unsettling. Your neighbors, will they cause trouble? Tom, no, Jake maybe. He's young and eager to prove himself. Clay set down the leather he'd been working. How long do you need? To rest before crossing into Mexico? 2 days, maybe 3, some of the elderly. She shook her head. This running is killing them faster than bullets would. Without thinking, Clay reached out and took her hand. She didn't pull away. Her fingers were calloused from work, strong and capable. They stood there, holding hands like young lovers, while the sun set behind the mountains. "What you said this morning," Ayoka began, then stopped. "Clay, you must know it's impossible. Even if feelings exist, our peoples will never accept it." "I know." He squeezed her hand gently. "Doesn't change how I feel." She turned to face him fully, and he saw tears in her eyes. "In my dreams, sometimes I see a different world. One where a woman can love who she chooses, where children don't huddle in root cellars, where—" She stopped, pulled her hand away. "But dreams are for fools and children." "Maybe. Or maybe dreams are what keep us human when the world tries to make us into something else." They were standing very close now. Clay could smell the sage and wood smoke in her hair, could see the faint scar on her chin, the way her lips parted slightly as she breathed. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. A shout from the barn shattered the spell. One of the warriors had spotted riders approaching. Many riders, moving fast. Clay grabbed his rifle. "Get everyone ready to run. I'll try to delay them." But Ayoka was already moving, calling orders in Apache. Within moments, the hidden people were emerging from their concealment, gathering the children, preparing to flee. The riders came into view. Not army, but worse. A civilian posse, maybe 15 men, led by Jake Bradley. They thundered into the yard, weapons drawn, faces grim with righteous anger. "We know they're here! McAllister!" Jake shouted. "Mitch Carson saw you leading them in this morning. It's over." Clay stepped onto his porch, rifle held casual but ready. "Don't know what Mitch thinks he saw, but there's nobody here but me. Don't lie to us." This from Bob Henshaw, whose ranch had lost cattle to Apache raids. "We tracked unshod ponies right to your property line. You're harboring hostiles, and we mean to see justice done." Behind him, Clay heard movement in the house. His mind raced, looking for a way out that didn't end in bloodshed. But the posse was spreading out, surrounding the buildings. There was nowhere for the Apache to run. "Justice?" Clay kept his voice steady. "Is that what you call shooting women and children? Because that's all that's here, families trying to survive. Apache families." Jake spat. "The same savages who've been terrorizing honest folks for years? Stand aside, McAllister, or share their fate." Clay jacked around into his rifle's chamber, the sound sharp in the evening air. "Can't do that. Jake, these people are under my protection." "Your protection?" Bob Henshaw laughed bitterly. "You forget what they did to your own mother?" "No, I remember. I also remember that hate and revenge won't bring her back." Clay met each man's eyes in turn. "Go home, please. There doesn't need to be killing here tonight." For a moment, the standoff held. Then Jake Bradley raised his pistol, and everything went to hell. The shot went wide, splinters from the porch post cutting Clay's cheek. He dove sideways, bringing his rifle up, then hesitated. These were his neighbors, men he'd known for years, but they were beyond reason now, caught up in fear and bloodlust. Apache warriors erupted from the barn, firing as they came. The posse wheeled to meet them, and the yard became a chaos of gun smoke and shouting. Clay saw Nasha go down, clutching his shoulder. Bob Henshaw fell from his horse, screaming. "Stop!" Clay roared, but his voice was lost in the battle. He saw Jake Bradley drawing a bead on someone in the doorway. Ayoka, trying to shepherd children to safety. Without conscious thought, Clay swung his rifle and fired. Jake spun and fell, blood spreading across his shirt. His father, Tom, just arriving with the army patrol he'd fetched, saw his son fall and screamed in anguish. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" The cavalry officer's voice cut through the chaos. Soldiers spread through the yard, weapons aimed at Apache and civilians alike. "Everyone drop your weapons, now!" Slowly, the shooting stopped. The yard was thick with gun smoke and the copper smell of blood. Clay let his rifle fall, his hands shaking. He'd shot Jake Bradley, wounded him at least, maybe killed him. A white man defending Apaches. There'd be no coming back from this. The officer, a Captain Forsyth, surveyed the scene with disgust. What in God's name happened here? Everyone tried to talk at once. Accusations flew. The Apache were quickly disarmed and herded together. Even the wounded Nasha. Clay found himself under guard as well, his neighbors looking at him with expressions of betrayal and rage. He was harboring them, Tom Bradley said, kneeling by his wounded son. Led them right to his ranch, then shot Jake when we tried to bring them to justice. Captain Forsyth turned to Clay. Is this true? You were hiding hostile Apaches? Clay straightened. Whatever came next? He wouldn't lie. They're not hostiles, just families trying to reach Mexico. Women and children. Captain, I gave them shelter. Women and children who've been raiding ranches. Someone shouted. To feed themselves. Clay shot back. Because we've taken everything else from them. The captain looked tired. Mr. McAllister, I'm placing you under arrest for harboring enemies of the United States. You'll be taken to Fort Huachuca for trial. Clay nodded. He'd expected this. But then Ayoka stepped forward, chin high despite the rifles pointed at her. I am Ayoka, daughter of Chief Naichi. These are my people. This man is innocent. I forced him to help us. That's a lie. Clay said quickly. I offered, silence. Her voice was regal, commanding. You want someone to blame? Soldier chief, take me. Let the others go. And I will tell you where other bands are hiding, but only if you let my people cross into Mexico freely. Captain Forsyth studied her with interest. You'd betray other Apaches? To save these children? Yes. She touched the necklace at her throat. I'm tired of war, Captain, tired of death. Let it end here. The captain was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the wounded moaned. Jake Bradley was alive but badly hurt. 2 Apache warriors were dead, 3 more wounded. The cost of hate, Clay thought bitterly. Always blood, always loss. I'll need to consult with my superiors, the captain said finally. The Apaches will be taken to the fort for processing. Mr. McAllister as well. We'll sort this out there. As the soldiers began organizing the prisoners, Ayoka managed to get close to Clay. I'm sorry, she whispered. I brought this on you. No, I made my choice. He wanted to touch her, but his hands were being bound. Whatever happens, I don't regret it. She smiled sadly. In another life, Clay McAllister, in another world. Then the soldiers separated them, and Clay was led to a wagon with the other prisoners, as they rolled away from his ranch, his home, which he'd likely never see again. Clay looked back to see his neighbors already dividing up his possessions. The vultures never waited long in the desert. But in another wagon, he could see Ayoka sitting straight and proud among her people, the silver necklace catching the last light of day. His mother's necklace. Now truly Ayoka's. A bridge between worlds that couldn't quite meet. Clay closed his eyes and prepared for whatever came next. He'd chosen love over hate, compassion over revenge. It would probably cost him everything. But somehow, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Some prices were worth paying, even if the payment was dear. The wagons rolled on through the gathering darkness, carrying them all toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the ranch stood empty, a monument to choices made and chances taken in a hard land that rarely forgave either one. Fort Huachuca was a world of dust and military precision, where the desert met the harsh reality of frontier justice. Clay spent 3 days in the stockade, a small cell that reeked of sweat and despair. Through the barred window, he could see the Apache prisoners in their own fenced compound, heavily guarded and waiting for deportation to San Carlos. On the 4th day, Captain Forsyth summoned him. The officer's tent was neat and sparse, maps of the territory covering one canvas wall. Forsyth looked older than his years, worn down by the endless cycle of violence between red and white. Jake Bradley will live, the captain said without preamble. Though he'll carry that bullet in his hip for the rest of his days, his father wants you hanged. Clay said nothing. There was nothing to say. The thing is, Forsyth continued, I've been doing some investigating, talking to people. Seems you've got a reputation as an honest man, McAllister. Even some of the Apaches speak well of you. That boy whose arm you fixed won't shut up about it. Doesn't change what I did. No, it doesn't. The captain poured himself a drink from a flask. Didn't offer Clay any. But it does complicate things. The federal prosecutor doesn't want to try you, says a jury might be sympathetic, given your mother's death. Bad precedent, letting a white man get away with harboring hostiles. So, what happens now? Forsyth smiled grimly. Politics, Mr. McAllister. Always politics. The Apache woman, Ayoka. She's been making good on her promise. Told us about 3 other bands in the mountains. In exchange, I've been authorized to offer her people passage to Mexico, with the understanding they never return to American soil. Clay's heart leaped, though he tried not to show it. All of them? All except her. She's too valuable as an informant. Washington wants her sent to San Carlos, where she can help convince other holdouts to surrender. The captain's expression suggested what he thought of Washington's plans. As for you, you're being released. Insufficient evidence. The prosecutor says, but you're done in this territory. McAllister, your ranch has been sold to cover damages. You've got 24 hours to leave Arizona. The dismissal was clear, but Clay couldn't help asking, can I see her? Before? Absolutely not. Forsyth's tone brooked no argument. You're lucky to be walking out of here alive. Don't push it. Clay was escorted back to his cell to gather his few belongings. Through the window, he watched the Apache camp, hoping for a glimpse of her. But the women were kept in their shelters, out of sight of the soldiers. That night, as Clay lay on his bunk contemplating exile, he heard a commotion outside. Voices raised in alarm. Running feet, the sharp bark of orders. He pressed against the bars, trying to see what was happening. Fire in the Apache compound, a passing soldier called. Nothing serious, just some bedding. But Clay knew better. A fire was a distraction. Cover for something else. His heart raced as he realized what Ayoka might be attempting. Sure enough, within minutes, there were shouts about escaped prisoners. The woman leader and a few others, someone yelled. They cut through the back fence while everyone was fighting the fire. Clay found himself grinning despite everything. Of course she wouldn't go meekly to San Carlos. Ayoka was too wild, too free to die a slow death on the reservation. The search parties went out, but Clay knew they wouldn't find her. She'd learned from the best how to disappear into the desert. By dawn, the soldiers returned empty-handed, and Captain Forsyth's expression was thunderous. Clay was released that afternoon with a warning never to return. He had the clothes on his back, his father's colt, and a horse the Army grudgingly provided, not Dolly, who'd been sold along with everything else. As he rode away from the fort, he felt adrift, cut loose from everything that had anchored his life. He made camp that night near a small spring, trying to decide where to go. California, maybe, or Colorado, somewhere far from Arizona and its memories. He was tending his small fire when he heard a horse approaching. His hand went to his gun, then froze as Ayoka emerged from the darkness. She was dressed in Mexican clothing, a peasant skirt and blouse that made her look younger, less fierce, but the necklace still gleamed at her throat, and her eyes were the same deep wells of strength. You should be halfway to Mexico by now, Clay said, his voice rougher than he intended. My people are. I sent them ahead with Nasha. She dismounted, moving stiffly. There were scratches on her arms from the fence, and exhaustion lined her face. I came to find you. Why? She was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. Because I couldn't let it end with us being led away in chains. Because. She looked at him then, and her mask finally cracked. Because I love you too, you foolish man. God help me, but I do. Clay was on his feet and across the fire before he knew he was moving. She met him halfway, and then they were kissing with all the desperate passion of people who'd thought they'd lost each other forever. Her lips were chapped from the desert wind, but soft beneath, and when she made a small sound in her throat, Clay thought his heart might burst. They pulled apart, breathing hard, foreheads touching. "This is madness," Ayoka whispered. "I know. My people need me. They're all I have left of my old life." "I know. And you've lost everything because of me. Your home, your land." Clay pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "No, I lost those things because I chose to be a better man than the one who rode into your camp seeking revenge. That's not on you." She smiled, sad and beautiful. "Where will you go?" "I was thinking California. Start over, maybe find work breaking horses." He hesitated, then plunged ahead. "Come with me. Clay, hear me out. Your people are safe in Mexico. Nasha can lead them now. He's ready. You know he is. We could go somewhere new, where nobody knows us. You could pass for Mexican, and I'm just another drifter looking for work. We could live a lie for the rest of our lives. Live free," Clay corrected. Together. Ayoka turned away, walking to where her horse stood. For a terrible moment, Clay thought she was leaving. Then she returned with a bag, pulling out supplies, food, water, ammunition. "I robbed the fort's stores before I left," she said with a ghost of her old smile. "Old habits. Is that a yes?" She looked at him for a long moment. "My uncle told me the necklace would keep me strong when the world tried to break me, but I think maybe it brought me to you instead, the woman who wore it first. Your mother, she was strong enough to die protecting what she loved. Maybe it's teaching me to be strong enough to live for what I love." Clay felt his eyes burn. She would have liked you, would have said you were too good for her wayward son, but she would have liked you. They spent that night by the spring, planning and talking and holding each other like the lifeline they'd become. Ayoka told him about her people's safe passage to Mexico, the valley where they'd settled near kinfolk who'd fled years earlier. Clay spoke of California, of the horse ranches he'd heard about near Sacramento, where a man's past mattered less than his skill with animals. "We can't ever come back," Ayoka said as dawn approached. "You understand that? Arizona is closed to us forever. I've got no reason to come back. Everything I care about is right here." She smiled, but it was tinged with melancholy. "In another life, we could have met properly. You could have courted me openly, brought horses to my father. We could have been married in both our traditions, raised children who belonged fully to both worlds. We'll make our own traditions," Clay promised. "Our own world, even if it's just big enough for two." They set out as the sun rose, heading west toward California and whatever future they could build together. Ayoka had changed back into men's clothing for riding, her hair bound up under a hat, but the necklace still showed at her throat. 3 days into their journey, they came upon a Mexican trading post. The owner, a shrewd old man named Joaquin, took their gold without asking questions. But as he counted out supplies, he said quietly, "I had a daughter once, married an Apache man. They were happy for the time they had." "What happened to them?" Ayoka asked. "What happens to all who try to live between worlds, but they had 5 good years first. 5 years of joy." He pushed an extra bag of cornmeal across the counter. "Wedding gift. Use it well." They rode on, the desert gradually giving way to grassland, then pine forests as they climbed into the California mountains. At night, they made camp away from the trails, still wary of pursuit. But no one came. To the world. Clay McAllister had vanished into the west, and Ayoka had disappeared into Mexico with her people. 2 weeks after leaving Arizona, they reached the Sacramento Valley. The land was green here, so different from the desert they'd known. Cattle and horses grazed in fields that seemed to stretch forever, and the smell of grass and wildflowers filled the air. Clay found work at the Broken Wheel Ranch, owned by a German immigrant named Klaus Weber who cared more about Clay's skill with horses than his past. The ranch was large, prosperous, always needing good hands. When Clay mentioned his wife was also skilled with horses, Weber hired her too, though he raised an eyebrow at her obvious Apache features. "My wife is Mexican," Clay said firmly, "from Sonora." Weber studied them both, then shrugged. "Mexican, Apache, Chinese. I don't care as long as the work gets done." "But others might not be so Practical. You understand? They understood. Ayoka became Maria in public. Speaking Spanish she'd learned from Mexican traders. They lived in a small cabin on the far edge of the ranch. Keeping to themselves. It wasn't easy. There were stares, whispers, the occasional hostility. But there was also surprising kindness from unexpected sources. Emma Weber, Klaus's wife, was the first to truly accept them. A mail-order bride who'd faced her own share of prejudice. She took Ayoka under her wing, teaching her to bake bread and tend the vegetable garden. Different is not wrong, she said one day, watching Ayoka work. Just different. The seasons turned. Spring brought new foals that Clay and Ayoka trained together, working in wordless harmony born of shared understanding. Summer meant long days in the saddle, moving cattle to fresh pasture. Fall was harvest time. The whole ranch working together to bring in crops and prepare for winter. And winter. Winter meant long nights in their cabin, just the two of them against the world. They'd push the furniture aside, and Ayoka would teach Clay Apache dances, laughing when he stumbled. He'd tell her stories his mother used to tell, fairy tales from the old country mixed with Bible stories. She'd share the legends of her people, tales of coyote and white-painted woman. One winter night, as snow fell softly outside, Ayoka took off the necklace and held it in her hands. "I've been thinking about your mother," she said, "about the night she died." Clay tensed, but she continued. "She chose to die rather than abandon you. And my uncle, who took this necklace, he died on the reservation, broken and bitter. 2 deaths, so much pain. And for what?" She looked at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "But then this necklace brought us together, all that death and hatred. And somehow it led to love. Is that justice? Fate? I don't know anymore." Clay took her hands, the necklace pressed between them. "Maybe it's just life. Terrible things happen, beautiful things happen, and we try to make sense of it all. But in the end," he kissed her gently, "in the end, we're here, together. That's what matters." She leaned against him, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire dance. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing their small corner of the world in pristine white. A new page, Clay thought. A fresh start. "I want to try something," Ayoka said suddenly. She stood and fastened the necklace around Clay's neck. "There, now it's yours again." The silver felt strange against his skin, heavier than he'd expected. He touched the Thunderbird pendant, remembering his mother's hands doing the same. Then he took it off and placed it back around Ayoka's neck. "No," he said, "it's exactly where it belongs." She smiled, the rare, full smile that transformed her face. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." They made love then, slow and tender, a confirmation of all the words they couldn't quite say. Afterward, they lay entwined, listening to the settling of the cabin and the whisper of snow against the windows. "Do you ever regret it?" Ayoka asked. "Giving up your ranch, your life in Arizona?" Clay thought about it. The ranch had been his father's dream more than his. Arizona held too many ghosts. What he'd found here, love, purpose, a chance at happiness, was worth more than 100 ranches. "Never," he said, and meant it. As spring approached, bringing new life to the valley, they began to talk about the future. Children, perhaps, a place of their own someday. Plans that would have seemed impossible just a year ago now felt within reach. They were healing, Clay realized. Both of them, slowly learning to live with their scars rather than be defined by them. The necklace that had once symbolized loss and rage now meant something different, a reminder that love could grow in the most unlikely ground. 3 years passed on the Broken Wheel Ranch, seasons of hard work and quiet happiness. Clay had earned a reputation as the best horse trainer in the valley, while Ayoka, still Maria to everyone but Clay, had become indispensable in managing the ranch's breeding program. They'd saved enough money to buy a small piece of land adjoining the ranch. Nothing fancy, just 20 acres with a creek running through it and space to build a proper home. It was on a warm September afternoon that their carefully constructed piece began to unravel. Clay was working a young stallion in the corral when he saw riders approaching. His blood ran cold when he recognized the lead figure, Tom Bradley, Jake's father, accompanied by two men Clay didn't know. "Thought I might find you here. McAllister," Tom said, dismounting stiffly. The years hadn't been kind to him. Grief and rage had carved deep lines in his face. "Took me 3 years of searching, but I knew you couldn't hide forever." Clay kept his movements calm, not wanting to spook the horse. "Tom, I'm sorry about Jake." "Sorry?" Tom's laugh was bitter. "You shot my boy, left him crippled, and you're sorry. He's alive. That's more than can be said for the Apache who died that night." "Apache?" Tom spat the word. "Speaking of which, where is she, the savage you threw everything away for?" Clay's hands tightened on the lead rope. "That's none of your concern. You found me. If you've come for satisfaction, let's settle it, but leave her out of this." One of the other men, a hired gun by the look of him, smiled unpleasantly. "Oh, we know all about your squaw. Maria, she calls herself now. Pretty thing for a savage." The stallion, sensing Clay's tension, began to dance nervously. Clay forced himself to breathe slowly, to think. 3 armed men, and him with nothing but a training whip. Ayoka was in the barn, checking on a mare about to foal, if he could keep them focused on him. "What do you want, Tom?" Clay asked directly. "You didn't ride all this way just to talk." Tom's hand moved to his gun. "Justice. The law might have let you go, but there's another kind of law out here. Mr. Bradley." Klaus Weber's voice cut through the tension. The ranch owner stood on his porch, a shotgun cradled in his arms. "This is private property. State your business or move along. No business with you. Weber, this is between me and McAllister. Man works for me. His troubles are my troubles." Klaus's English was accented but firm. "And we don't settle disputes with guns on my land. You have complaint. You take to sheriff." The hired gun shifted in his saddle. "Old man, you don't want to get involved in this. Already involved." Emma Weber appeared beside her husband, also armed. "Mr. Clay's good man." "Good worker. You leave now." For a moment, the situation balanced on a knife's edge. Then Tom Bradley smiled, cold and mean. "All right, we'll go. But this isn't over. McAllister, you can't hide behind these people forever. And that Apache whore of yours, well, accidents happen." They rode off, but Clay knew they'd be back. He finished with the stallion, his mind racing. They'd have to leave, tonight if possible. 3 years of building a life, gone in an instant. He found Ayoka in the barn, coaxing a foal to its feet. She looked up at his approach, her smile fading as she saw his expression. "What's wrong?" "Tom Bradley found us, him and 2 hired guns." Clay quickly explained the confrontation. "We need to go, now." Ayoka was quiet for a moment, stroking the foal's damp coat. "No." "What?" "I said no. I'm tired of running. Clay." She stood, facing him with that fierce pride he'd first seen in the Apache camp. "We've built something here. We have friends, a home, a future. I won't let them take that from us. They'll kill us, or worse. Maybe it's time to stop letting fear drive us." She touched the necklace at her throat. "Your mother didn't run. She stood her ground, and died for it. Yes, but she died protecting what she loved. That's not the worst way to go." Clay wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in her eyes. The same look she'd had when she'd faced down the army captain, when she'd chosen love over safety. His Apache queen, fierce and unbroken despite everything. "All right," he said finally. "But we do this smart. Klaus and Emma shouldn't pay for our troubles." They spent the evening making preparations, cleaning weapons, setting up watch positions. Klaus insisted on helping, brushing aside their protests. "I came to America to be free man," he said, "not to bow to bullies. We stand together." Word spread among the ranch hands. By nightfall, Clay was surprised to find he had allies, men who'd worked beside him, who'd seen him doctor their horses and help with their problems. Not everyone was willing to risk themselves for an Apache woman and her white husband. But enough were. The attack came just after midnight. Clay was on watch when he saw riders approaching, dark shapes against the star-filled sky. He fired a warning shot, and the night exploded into chaos. Tom Bradley had brought more men, 8 or 9. Clay counted. They came hard, shooting to kill. But the ranch was ready. Rifle fire erupted from the bunkhouse, the barn, the main house. The attackers, expecting to catch them sleeping, found themselves in a real fight. Clay lost track of time in the battle. He fired, reloaded, fired again, trying to protect the barn where Ayoka had positioned herself. He saw one of the hired guns go down, another clutch his shoulder and retreat, but they kept coming. Then, disaster. A thrown torch landed on the barn roof. Within moments, flames began to spread across the dry shingles. Horses screamed in terror, and Clay heard Ayoka shouting, trying to get them out. He abandoned his position, running for the barn. Tom Bradley stepped out of the shadows, gun raised. Time slowed as Clay saw the muzzle flash, felt the bullet punch into his shoulder. He stumbled but kept moving, his own gun coming up. They fired simultaneously. Tom Bradley folded, clutching his belly. Clay didn't stop to check if the wound was fatal. The barn was fully ablaze now, and Ayoka was still inside. He found her trying to lead the last of the horses out, coughing in the thick smoke. A burning beam crashed down, blocking their exit. Clay grabbed her, looking desperately for another way out. "The back wall!" Ayoka gasped. "It's just planks." Together, they kicked at the boards until they splintered. Clay pushed Ayoka through first, then squeezed after her just as the roof began to collapse. They stumbled away from the inferno, gasping clean air. The battle was winding down. Bodies lay scattered in the yard, some moving, some still. Klaus Weber stood over a wounded attacker, his shotgun steady. Emma was bandaging one of the ranch hands, and Tom Bradley. Tom Bradley lay where he'd fallen. His breathing labored. Clay knelt beside him, pressing a hand to the wound. It was bad, probably fatal, but the man was conscious. Should have stayed gone. Tom wheezed. "Jake, my boy, he's alive," Clay said. "He'll have a life, a future. This didn't have to happen." Tom's eyes found Ayoka, standing nearby with soot streaking her face. "Apache, killed my brother, back in '62, killed Jake's uncle. Always taking from us, and we took from them," Clay said quietly. "Where does it end, Tom?" Tom coughed, blood on his lips. "With us, I guess. Tell Jake. Tell him." But whatever message he wanted passed died with him, his eyes going fixed and glassy. The aftermath was a blur of sheriff's questions, statements, and paperwork. The surviving attackers were arrested, though they claimed Tom Bradley had hired them under false pretenses. The barn was a total loss, several horses dead in the fire. But somehow, miraculously, none of the defenders had been killed. Clay's shoulder wound proved minor, the bullet passing clean through. As Emma Weber bandaged it, she said quietly, "You saved our horses, risked your life for animals." "Ayoka was in there," Clay said simply. Emma smiled. "Yes, but you would have gone anyway, for horses. This I know about you." The community's reaction surprised Clay. He'd expected condemnation for bringing violence to their peaceful valley. Instead, there was an outpouring of support. Neighbors arrived to help clear the burned barn, bringing lumber and supplies for rebuilding. The story spread how Clay and his wife had stood against prejudice and hate, how the German immigrant had backed them, how working men had risked their lives for principle. Not everyone approved, of course. Some muttered about Apache lovers and the natural order of things, but they were increasingly outnumbered by those who saw Clay and Ayoka simply as neighbors who'd been wronged. A week after the attack, as they were helping raise the frame of the new barn, Sheriff Patterson took Clay aside. "Got a telegram from Arizona," he said. "That Bradley boy, Jake, he wants to come out, talk to you." Clay's first instinct was to refuse, but Ayoka, overhearing, put her hand on his arm. "Let him come. Maybe he can break the cycle his father couldn't." Jake Bradley arrived 2 weeks later, limping heavily from his old wound. He was thinner than Clay remembered, his face marked by chronic pain, but his eyes were clear, lacking his father's consuming rage. They met at the sheriff's office. Neutral ground. Jake studied Clay for a long moment, then said, "I hated you for 3 years, planned all the ways I'd kill you when I found you. And now? Now my father's dead, and I'm tired." Jake shifted his weight, grimacing. He couldn't let it go. The hate ate him alive, made him into something I didn't recognize at the end. Clay waited, saying nothing. "I didn't come for revenge," Jake continued. "I came to—" He stopped, started again. "In the war, I saw men do terrible things. Good men, bad men, all mixed together until you couldn't tell the difference. Maybe that's what happened that night at your ranch. Maybe we were all a little bit right and a little bit wrong. Your father shot first," Clay said, "but without heat. I know, and you shot back. And here we are." Jake met his eyes. "I'm selling the double B. Can't work it proper with this leg and the memories. I want to start fresh somewhere. Thought you should know there's no more Bradley vengeance coming your way." They shook hands awkwardly. Two men bound by violence trying to choose peace. Jake left that afternoon, and Clay never saw him again. Years later, he heard Jake had become a schoolteacher in Oregon, married with children of his own. The cycle broken. As Ayoka had hoped, fall turned to winter, the new barn rising from the ashes of the old. Clay and Ayoka worked side by side with their neighbors, and something shifted in the community's perception. Maria was still a fiction, but it became a polite fiction, a way for everyone to navigate the complex realities of frontier life. On Christmas Eve, Klaus and Emma invited them to dinner at the main house. Other ranch families were there too, a mix of German, Irish, Mexican, and even a Chinese cook who'd been with the ranch for years. As they sat around the table, sharing food and stories, Clay realized this was what America could be, not the pure, segregated vision some fought for, but this messy, complicated, beautiful mixing of peoples. Ayoka had been quiet through dinner, but as Emma brought out dessert, a traditional German Stollen, she suddenly stood. "I have something to say." Her voice was strong, carrying clearly through the room. "My name is not Maria. My name is Ayoka, daughter of Chief Naichi of the Chiricahua Apache. I have been living a lie because I was afraid, but tonight, among friends who risked their lives for us, I want to speak truth." The room was dead silent. Clay held his breath, waiting for reactions. Emma Weber was the first to speak. "Ayoka is a beautiful name. It means what? She who brings happiness," Ayoka said, her voice catching slightly. "Good name, true name." Emma raised her glass. "To Ayoka, who brings happiness, and to Clay, who brings stubborn courage. May you always find peace at our table." One by one, the others raised their glasses. Not all were comfortable. Clay could see it in some faces, but they drank the toast. It wasn't perfect acceptance, but it was a beginning. That night, as they walked back to their cabin under a crystalline winter sky, Ayoka took Clay's arm. "Do you think they'll still accept us, now that they know?" "Some will, some won't, but at least now we're not hiding." Clay pulled her close. "Are you happy?" She considered the question. "Happy? I don't know, but I'm not afraid anymore. And I'm home." She looked up at him. "You gave me that. You and this place and these people. Home." They stood in the doorway of their cabin, looking out over the valley that had become theirs through blood and struggle and simple daily work. The necklace at Ayoka's throat caught the moonlight, silver and eternal. "Your mother's spirit can rest now," Ayoka said softly. "The necklace has found its purpose, not as a symbol of loss, but of lives joined across all the barriers that would keep us apart." Clay kissed her, long and deep, tasting their shared future. When they finally went inside, closing the door against the cold, they were no longer Clay and Maria, living a necessary lie. They were Clay and Ayoka, Unlikely lovers who'd found a way to exist in a world that said they couldn't. It wasn't happily ever after. Life was too complex for fairy tale endings. There would be more challenges, more prejudice to face, more bridges to build between their two worlds. But for tonight, in their small cabin on the edge of the California frontier, they had each other and the promise of tomorrow. The necklace that had begun as a token of tragedy had become something else entirely. A bridge between past and future, between Apache and white, between the world that was and the world that might yet be. And in that transformation lay all the hope two people needed to face whatever came next. Spring came early that year, melting the snow from the mountains and bringing new life to the valley. Clay and Ayoka had settled into their truth, no longer hiding behind carefully constructed lies. The revelation of her identity had rippled through the community like a stone thrown into still water. Some circles of acceptance, some of rejection, but the surface eventually calming into a new normal. It was on a morning in late March that Sheriff Patterson rode up to their cabin, his face grave. Clay was mending harness while Ayoka worked in their small garden, coaxing vegetables from the California soil. "Morning, Sheriff," Clay said, setting down his work. Something in Patterson's expression made his stomach tighten. "What brings you out here?" Patterson dismounted slowly, like a man bearing bad news. "Got a wire from Fort Huachuca. Thought you should know. There's been an uprising at San Carlos. Some of the Apache broke out, headed for Mexico. The army's been chasing them for weeks." Ayoka had come up behind Clay, her hands still dirty from the garden. "My people?" she asked quietly. "Don't know the details, ma'am, but the commander at Huachuca remembered you had folks who went to Mexico. They're requesting cooperation from local authorities to watch for Apache refugees." Patterson looked uncomfortable. "I'm supposed to report any Apache in my jurisdiction." "And will you?" Clay asked, his hand moving instinctively toward where his gun would be. Patterson was quiet for a moment, then said, "I came out here to warn you, didn't I? But folks are scared. The newspapers are full of stories about raids and attacks. If refugees do come this way, we understand." Ayoka said, "Thank you for the warning." After Patterson left, Ayoka was quiet for a long time. She stood at the window, looking south toward mountains she couldn't see, toward a homeland she'd left behind. "You want to go to them?" Clay said. It wasn't a question. "If it's Nasha's band, if they're in trouble." She turned to him, conflict clear in her eyes. "They're my responsibility. I led them for so long." "Then we go." She shook her head. "We have a life here. You have work. We have the land we've saved for. I can't ask you to throw it all away again." Clay crossed to her, taking her hands. "You didn't ask. I'm offering. If your people need help, we help. That's what family does." 2 days later, they set out. Clay had spoken with Klaus, who understood and promised their jobs would be waiting when they returned. If they returned. Emma had pressed supplies on them, including medical items that might be needed. They traveled carefully, avoiding main roads. The newspapers Clay had seen in town were indeed full of lurid stories about Apache depredations, though reading between the lines, it seemed the escapees were mostly trying to reach Mexico without confrontation. Still, fear made people dangerous. 3 days into their journey, in the rough country near the border, they found signs, unshod horse tracks, a campsite carefully concealed. Ayoka studied the signs with growing excitement. "It's them," she said. "See how the fire was built? That's Nasha's way. And here, this mark on the tree, it's a message." She led them higher into the mountains, following traces invisible to Clay's eyes. As the sun began to set, they smelled smoke and heard the soft nicker of horses. "Wait here," Ayoka said. But Clay shook his head. "We go together." They entered the camp with their hands visible, Ayoka calling out in Apache. Warriors materialized from the shadows, weapons ready, then lowered them as they recognized her. There were cries of joy, quickly muffled. And then Nasha himself emerged from behind a boulder. The scarred warrior looked older, worn down by years of running and hiding. But his eyes lit up when he saw Ayoka. and he embraced her like a daughter. "Little sister," he said in accented English, including Clay in his greeting. "We heard you were dead, or taken to Florida with the other leaders. I've been living in California. This is my husband, Clay. You remember him." Nasha studied Clay with those sharp, dark eyes. "The man who brought us supplies, who shot his own people to protect us." He extended his hand, and Clay shook it, feeling the strength still in the older man's grip. "You are welcome in our camp." The band was smaller than before, maybe 15 people, mostly women and children. They looked exhausted, underfed, their clothes patched and repatched. Clay saw Bidsy among them, no longer a boy but a young man, his once injured arm strong and whole. That night, around a small fire, Nasha told their story. Life in Mexico had been hard but free. They'd found a valley, started small farms, began to build new lives. Then soldiers had come, Mexican soldiers, claiming the Apache were raiding local ranches. "We weren't," Nasha said bitterly. "We kept to ourselves, traded fairly. But when has truth mattered? They burned our crops, scattered our people. Some went deeper into Mexico, others," he gestured to the ragged band. "We decided to try for San Carlos, to join our relatives there. Better the reservation than Mexican bullets. But San Carlos erupted before you got there," Ayoka guessed. "Yes, now we're caught between. Can't go back to Mexico, can't go to the reservation, can't stay here." He looked at Clay. "Your people will hunt us like animals. Already they've killed 3 of our young men who went to trade for food." Clay felt the weight of their desperation. These weren't the fierce raiders of newspaper headlines. They were families trying to survive in a world that had no place for them. "There might be another way," he said slowly. "It's not perfect, but—" He told them about the Broken Wheel Ranch, about Klaus Weber's practical attitude toward hard workers regardless of origin, about the growing Mexican community in the valley who might provide cover for Apache who could pass as Mexican laborers. "You're suggesting we hide among your people?" Nasha's voice was skeptical. "Pretend to be what we're not? I'm suggesting you survive." Clay said, "Live to see your children grow up. Keep your traditions alive in private while building new lives in public, like I did." Ayoka added quietly, "It's not ideal, but it's life." The debate that followed was long and sometimes heated. Some wanted to fight their way back to Mexico. Others spoke of surrendering to the army, hoping for mercy. But gradually, Ayoka and Clay's proposal gained support. "We'll need papers," Nasha said finally. "Documents saying we're Mexican citizens. And we'll need to learn Spanish better. And—" he shook his head. "So many lives to live. I know someone who might help with the papers," Clay said, thinking of a forger in Sacramento who owed him a favor. "And the lies, they get easier, or at least more natural." It took a week to make the arrangements. Clay rode to Sacramento alone, returning with forged documents that transformed Apache refugees into Mexican laborers. The quality wasn't perfect, but it might pass casual inspection. The journey north was tense. They traveled at night when possible. The women and children dressed in Mexican clothing Ayoka had procured. By day, they were just another group of migrant workers heading to the California harvest. Only once were they challenged, by a group of cowboys who eyed them suspiciously. Clay did the talking, spinning a tale of crop failure in Sonora and families seeking honest work. His white face and confident manner carried the day, though Ayoka's hand never left the knife concealed in her skirts. When they finally reached the Broken Wheel Ranch, Klaus Weber met them with his characteristic pragmatism. 15 new workers? And you vouch for them? Clay. I do. They're good people. Hard workers. They just need a chance. Klaus studied the group, his eyes lingering on Nasha's scarred face. Apache, he said. It wasn't a question. Clay tensed, but Klaus continued. In Germany, I saw what happens when people are marked as other, as less than human. I came here to escape that. He nodded decisively. They can stay, but they work, yes? No charity here. We work, Nasha said in his careful English. Thank you. Settling the band wasn't easy. They were housed in an old bunkhouse on the far side of the ranch. away from curious eyes. The adults took on various jobs, the men as ranch hands, the women helping with cooking and washing. The children, including Bitsy, were the biggest challenge. They need schooling. Emma Weber declared, all children need to read and write. But the local school wouldn't take Apache children, Mexican or otherwise. So Emma started her own small school in the ranch kitchen, teaching letters and numbers alongside her bread making. It was there that Ayoka found her new calling, helping Emma teach not just English and arithmetic, but bridging two worlds for confused children. Months passed. The Apache refugees slowly became part of the ranch's fabric. Their true identity, an open secret that most chose to politely ignore. There were tensions, fights between young Apache men and white cowboys, suspicious looks from neighboring ranches, the constant fear of discovery. But there were also moments of grace. Clay watched Nasha teaching a young white boy how to track deer, saw Apache women and Mexican workers sharing recipes and child-rearing duties, witnessed the slowly growing acceptance that came from working side by side. One evening, as fall painted the valley in gold and crimson, Clay found Ayoka sitting with several Apache women, teaching them English while learning traditional beadwork in return. The necklace at her throat caught the setting sun as she laughed at something one of the women said. "Regrets?" he asked later as they walked home. "Every day," she said honestly. "I think about what we've lost, what these children will never know about their heritage. But then I see them learning to read, see them with full bellies and warm clothes. And I think, maybe this is how we survive. Not as we were, but as we must be." That winter, word came that made their choices seem even more necessary. The Apache wars were ending in the only way they could, with total defeat. Geronimo had surrendered, and the Chiricahua were being sent to Florida as prisoners of war, an entire people exiled from their homeland. Nasha took the news hard. "We should have fought," he said, staring into the fire. "Died as warriors instead of living as shadows." "And what would that have accomplished?" Ayoka asked gently. "More dead children? More grieving mothers? We're alive. Uncle, our children are learning, growing. That's its own form of resistance." Christmas came again, and this time the Apache were included in the ranch celebration. Clay watched Bidzi perform a traditional dance, modified and explained as a Mexican folk dance for the comfort of nervous guests. The boy's pride in his heritage, even disguised, was evident. Sheriff Patterson attended, and Clay saw him watching the performance thoughtfully. Later, the sheriff pulled Clay aside. "I know what they are," Patterson said quietly. "Hell, probably half the valley knows. But as long as they're peaceful, as long as there's no trouble, there won't be," Clay promised. Patterson nodded. "See that there isn't. There's talk of closing the reservations, of forcing all Apache to become farmers or citizens or just disappear. Maybe what you're doing here is the best answer. Not perfect, but better than the alternatives." As winter gave way to spring, changes came to the ranch. Klaus Weber, getting older, began talking of Clay as his successor in managing the horse program. Several of the young Apache had proven gifted with horses, learning from both Clay and their own traditions. A synthesis was emerging, neither purely white nor Apache, but something new. Ayoka started a garden where she grew both traditional Apache plants and European vegetables, teaching the children about both. "They need to know where they came from," she said, "even if they can't go back there." One day, a letter arrived from Jake Bradley. He wrote of his new life in Oregon, his work teaching, his efforts to ensure children learn truth rather than prejudice. "I tell them about that night," he wrote, "about how fear and hatred led to violence that solved nothing. Maybe if they learn young, they'll do better than we did." Clay showed the letter to Ayoka, who read it with tears in her eyes. "He broke the cycle," she said. "There's hope in that." That spring, as they worked together in the garden, Ayoka told Clay she was pregnant. They'd been trying for years without success, and both had quietly accepted they might never have children. Now, faced with the reality, they were both thrilled and terrified. What world will this child inherit? Ayoka wondered, her hand on her still flat belly. Neither Apache nor white, but something in between. A new world, Clay said, pulling her close. One we're helping to build. As Ayoka's pregnancy progressed, the Apache women surrounded her with care and traditional knowledge. While Emma Weber provided more modern medical advice, it was a perfect metaphor for their lives, straddling two worlds, taking the best from each. The baby came with the first snow, a daughter with Clay's gray eyes and Ayoka's strong features. They named her Sarah, after Clay's mother, with the Apache name Izan Chu, meaning new woman. As Clay held his daughter for the first time, the silver necklace gleaming at Ayoka's throat, he thought about the long journey that had brought them here, from revenge to understanding, from hatred to love, from war to an imperfect peace. The necklace that had begun as a symbol of loss had become a bridge between worlds, and now it would pass to a new generation born of both. She'll have challenges, Ayoka said softly, watching their daughter sleep, not fully accepted by either world, or claimed by both. Clay countered, "Look around us. The world is changing, slowly, painfully, but changing. By the time she's grown, maybe there'll be room for people who don't fit in neat categories." Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. In the bunkhouse, they could hear singing, Apache voices raised in traditional songs, carefully quiet but determinedly present. On the ranch, two worlds were learning to coexist, not perfectly but genuinely. The story that began with violence and loss had transformed into something neither Clay nor Ayoka could have imagined. Not an ending, but a beginning, complex, challenging, and full of possibility. The necklace would continue its journey, carrying the memory of pain, but also the promise of healing, bridging past and future in its silver embrace. 10 years passed like seasons in the valley, each bringing its own challenges and blessings. Sarah grew strong and bright, running barefoot through the ranch with a mixed group of children, Apache, Mexican, and white, who saw each other simply as playmates. She spoke English at school, Spanish with the ranch workers, and Apache in quiet moments with her mother and the elders who still remembered the old ways. Clay had indeed become Klaus Weber's successor in managing the horse program, and under his leadership, the Broken Wheel Ranch had gained fame throughout California for its exceptional horses. Several of the Apache men had become skilled trainers, blending their traditional understanding of horses with modern techniques. The ranch had become a place where different wisdom traditions met and strengthened each other. It was a warm spring morning when everything changed. Clay was working with a young stallion when he saw a familiar figure at the ranch gate, a woman in traveling clothes, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a simple bun, a journal clutched in her hands. Something about her bearing, her watchful eyes, made him uneasy. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Clay asked, approaching carefully. "Mr. McAllister?" Clay McAllister. Her voice was educated, Eastern. "My name is Helen Morrison. I'm a journalist with Harper's Magazine. I'm writing a series on the transformation of the American West." Clay's guard went up immediately. Journalists meant exposure, questions, the careful life they'd built potentially unraveling. "I'm just a horse trainer, Mrs. Morrison. Nothing worth writing about here." She smiled, a knowing expression that increased his unease. "Oh, I think there's quite a story here. A white man who chose love over revenge. Apache people finding new lives. Communities learning to live together. The kind of story America needs to hear." "I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" She pulled a photograph from her journal, old and grainy, but clearly showing Clay being arrested at Fort Huachuca. Ayoka visible in the background. "It took me years to track you down, Mr. McAllister, but I'm very persistent." That evening, Clay and Ayoka held an emergency meeting with Nasha and the other Apache leaders. The debate was fierce. Some wanted to run again, to disappear before the story could be written. Others were tired of running, tired of hiding. "Maybe it's time," said Bidziyi, now a young man with a wife and child of his own. "Maybe if people know our story, know that we're just trying to live peacefully, or maybe they come with torches and guns. Nasha countered. You didn't see what happened when whites learned where peaceful Apache were living? Ayoka had been quiet throughout the debate. Finally, she spoke. This woman, she'll write her story whether we cooperate or not. If we run, she'll write about the dangerous Apache who fled in the night. If we stay and tell our truth, we risk everything. Clay finished. We risk everything either way. Ayoka said. She touched the necklace, as she still did in moments of decision. I think it's time to stop being afraid of our own story. The next morning, they invited Helen Morrison to tea. The journalist was sharp, prepared, and surprisingly sympathetic. She'd spent years researching the Apache Wars, the broken treaties, the human cost on both sides. I'm not here to write another sensational piece about savage Indians, she said directly. I want to tell the truth about what happens after the war's end, how people find ways to live together. Your story could help others understand that peace is possible. And if the wrong people read your story? Clay asked. If they come for the Apache living here? Helen was quiet for a moment. I can't promise there won't be consequences. But I can promise to tell your story with honesty and respect, to show the Apache as people, not symbols, to show that integration, however imperfect, is possible. After much discussion, they agreed, but on their terms. Helen would spend a month on the ranch, observing daily life, conducting interviews. She would use pseudonyms for those who requested them and would focus on the success of integration rather than revealing locations of hidden Apache. Those weeks were transformative. Helen interviewed everyone, from Klaus and Emma Weber about their decision to hire Apache workers, to the Apache themselves about their struggles and adaptations, to white ranch hands about working alongside former enemies. She watched Sarah and the other children play together, attended the mixed Sunday gatherings where Christian hymns were followed by traditional Apache stories, carefully presented as Mexican folk tales. One evening, Helen sat with Ayoka as she taught Sarah traditional beadwork. Your daughter is remarkable, Helen observed. She moves between worlds like water, because she belongs to both, Ayoka said, guiding Sarah's small fingers. That's her strength and her burden. And the necklace? Helen had noticed how often Ayoka touched it, how Sarah's eyes were drawn to it. Ayoka told the story. Clay's mother, the raid, the first meeting, all of it. Helen listened without interrupting, her pen moving across the page. It's perfect, Helen said finally. The necklace as a symbol of how pain can transform into something else, how objects carry different meanings for different people, and how those meanings can evolve. Will you write all of it? Clay asked, having listened from the doorway. With your permission. It's a powerful story. Revenge transformed to love. Symbols of loss becoming bridges between peoples. Helen looked at them both. It's the kind of story that could change hearts. Sarah, who'd been quietly beating, looked up. Will you write about how Papa taught Bidsi to train horses, and how Mama teaches us all the plant names in 3 languages, and how Mrs. Weber makes Apache fry bread now? Helen smiled. I'll write about all of it. Little one, the whole beautiful, complicated truth. The article appeared 6 months later, titled After the Wars, A New Way Forward in California. It told their story honestly, the violence that started it, the unlikely love that grew from tragedy, the community that slowly learned acceptance. Helen had crafted it carefully, protecting those who needed protection while illuminating larger truths. The response was immediate and mixed. Letters poured in, some full of hate and condemnation, others expressing hope and recognition. A minister in Texas wrote about using the story in sermons about forgiveness. A teacher in Massachusetts asked for more information to share with students. A group of Apache on a reservation in Arizona sent a message of guarded support, though some felt the Apache at Broken Wheel had abandoned their culture. More concerning were the official responses. The Bureau of Indian Affairs sent investigators to the ranch, but Klaus Weber met them with careful documentation, showing all his workers were legal Mexican citizens. Sheriff Patterson, now older and grayer, backed up the ranch's story. The investigation ended with bureaucratic frustration, but no action. Still, the exposure changed things. Some neighboring ranches cut ties with Broken Wheel. A few workers left, fearing association with Indian lovers. But others came, people drawn by the vision of something different, something better. One unexpected visitor was an elderly Apache woman from the San Carlos Reservation. She'd read the article and made the difficult journey to see for herself. When she met Ayoka, she spoke sharply in Apache for several minutes, clearly criticizing the choices made. But then she saw the children, Apache children, reading and writing, speaking their language, quietly, learning traditional crafts alongside modern skills. Her anger softened. "It's not the old way," she said finally, "but the old way is gone. Maybe this is how we survive. Not as we were, but as we must become." She stayed a month, teaching the children stories and songs that even Nasha had forgotten. When she left, it was with tears and blessings. As 1890 dawned, the world was changing rapidly. The frontier was closing, the Wild West becoming mythology. Railroads and telegraphs were binding the nation together, bringing new ideas and challenges. Sarah, now 10, was a bright student who dreamed of becoming a teacher like her honorary uncle Jake Bradley, with whom they still corresponded. She wore her mixed heritage with increasing confidence, helped by parents who'd taught her to be proud of both streams of her blood. One day, as Ayoka worked in her expanded garden, now a small farm supplying vegetables to several towns, Sarah asked about the necklace. "Will I wear it someday, Mama?" Ayoka touched the silver thunderbird, considering, perhaps, or perhaps by then, we won't need symbols to remind us of where we've been. Maybe you'll create your own symbols for where you're going. That evening, the ranch held one of its regular gatherings. Apache, Mexican, and white families shared food and stories. Nasha, now truly elderly but still sharp, told tales of the old days, carefully edited for mixed company but keeping essential truths. Emma Weber's adopted daughter, a young Apache woman who'd lost her parents, played piano while others sang hymns and folk songs. Clay stood with Sheriff Patterson, watching the peaceful scene. "Never thought I'd see anything like this," Patterson said. "When I first came west, Indians and whites mixing socially would have been unthinkable." "Times change," Clay said. "People too, if you give them a chance." That article caused quite a stir back east. There's talk in Congress about Indian citizenship, about ending the reservation system. Maybe what you've done here is showing folks a way forward. "We didn't do it to show anyone anything," Clay said. "We did it to survive, to live. The rest just happened." As the evening wound down, Ayoka found Clay by the corral, watching the horses that had brought them prosperity and purpose. She leaned against him, comfortable in the silence they'd learned to share. "Any regrets?" she asked, echoing his old question. Clay thought about the ranch in Arizona, the simple life he'd planned before that fateful day he saw his mother's necklace. Then he looked at the gathering breaking up, families heading home with calls of good night in 3 languages. His daughter helping clear dishes while chattering with her mixed group of friends. "None," he said. "You? I miss the desert sometimes, the simplicity of knowing who you were and where you belonged." She smiled. "But then I see what we've built here, the lives we've saved and changed, and I know this is where we were meant to be." As they walked back to their house, larger now, built with their own hands and the help of neighbors who'd become family, Sarah ran up to them, breathless with excitement. "Mama, Papa, Mrs. Morrison sent a letter. She wants to write a book about us, about the whole ranch. She says our story could help change laws, help other Apache find new ways to live." "Can she?" Clay and Ayoka exchanged glances, a whole conversation in a look. The exposure of a book would bring new challenges, new scrutiny. But it might also spread hope, show possibilities, maybe even influence the policies being debated in distant Washington. "We'll discuss it with everyone," Ayoka said. "This isn't just our decision anymore." That night, as they prepared for bed, Ayoka removed the necklace and held it in her hands. The silver was worn smooth in places from years of touching, But the thunderbird still spread its wings in defiant flight. "Your mother wore this with pride," she said to Clay. "I've worn it with purpose. Maybe it's time for it to rest, to become memory instead of mission." Clay took the necklace, feeling its familiar weight. Then he fastened it back around Ayoka's neck. "Not yet. Sarah's not ready, and you still need its strength. When the time comes, we'll know." Outside, a coyote called to the moon, that wild sound that had haunted and comforted them through all their trials. Some things remained unchanged despite all the transformation around them. The desert was still there, patient and eternal. The mountains still stood, and love, complicated and difficult and real, still found ways to bridge the spaces between peoples as they settled into sleep. Clay thought about the long journey from that Apache camp to this moment. His mother's necklace had traveled from tragedy through revenge to forgiveness, from symbol of loss to bridge between worlds. Soon, perhaps, it would pass to a new generation who would carry it forward into an America struggling to become something better than its bloody past. The story that had begun in violence and hatred had transformed into something neither purely Apache nor white, but vibrantly, hopefully American in the truest sense, a blending of peoples and cultures. Imperfect but striving, finding ways to live together on land that belonged to all and none. In the darkness, Sarah sang softly in her room, an Apache lullaby Emma Weber had taught her. Words ancient as the mountains wrapped in a melody borrowed from a German folk song. It was the sound of the future, complex and beautiful, and utterly unpredictable. Clay reached for Ayoka's hand, finding it in the darkness. Together they listened to their daughter sing, the silver necklace resting between them, carrying all its history into tomorrow. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect with listeners around the world. If you enjoyed this tale from the Wild West, please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Clay and Ayoka's journey. What touched you most about their story? How do you think their daughter Sarah's life will unfold? Let's discuss in the comments.